Today I want to talk about 7 underrated early Windows 95 games. Some of them are original releases, and some are ports from other systems. So let's start with Hunter Hunted, one of the more interesting attempts by Sierra Entertainment to break away from its classic point-and-click roots and move into something more action-focused. The game was developed by its subsidiary Dynamics, which already had a reputation for experimenting with a wider range of genres, and you can definitely feel that here. At its core, this is a pretty straightforward action platformer, but one that's clearly designed with PC players in mind. The controls feel natural on a keyboard, and the difficulty is fairly forgiving, so it's easy to pick up and just play. The main gimmick is the whole hunter versus hunted concept. You've got Jack the human and Garathi Den the beast going up against each other. In some levels they switch roles, but honestly it doesn't change things that much. Most of the time you're just collecting items, grabbing weapons, or making your way to the exit. Visually, it's solid for its time, and the soundtrack really shows off the advantages of CD audio, even if it doesn't play consistently throughout the game. The real issue is that it gets repetitive pretty quickly. There are barely any cutscenes, and the ones that do exist don't really push the story forward. So you end up stuck in this loop of missions without much happening in between. I remember getting through something like 40 levels before just moving on to something else. Still, it's a genuinely fun game in small doses, and it's kind of a shame more people don't remember it today. So the Beavis and Butthead series is definitely not underrated, but Virtual Stupidity is a game people still don't talk about enough. Beavis and Butthead in Virtual Stupidity is a classic point-and-click adventure that recreates the show's humor and animation almost one-to-one, with full voice acting and fully animated scenes.
28-ounce cola. Get that, punk?
No. Thank you, drive through. Hey, Beavis, check it out.
It starts with Beavis and Butthead getting their usual beating from Todd, then deciding he's so cool they have to join his gang.
Yeah, we should, go and, hang out with Todd. Yeah, he'll be like, Beavis, my man, have some chicks.
And from there, it's all about escaping school and messing around in Highland, Texas. Now, point-and-click is a bit of a weird fit here, but somehow even two complete idiots can make progress, as long as they keep trying dumb things.
Science is cool. Settle down, Beavis.
It's not an easy game, with quite a bit of pixel hunting, a full screen mode that really shows the low resolution, and progression that isn't always clear. But even when you're stuck, most actions still lead to funny outcomes, which makes experimenting part of the fun.
Get the hell out of here, Beavis!
And then there are the mini-games, which became so popular they were later released on a separate disc, with even more added. So if you like this kind of humor and don't mind digging through some pixels, this is definitely one to try at least once.
You sank my battleship.
So Pitfall the Mayan Adventure was actually pretty well known back in the 16-bit era, and it even got a Game Boy Advance port. But on PC, it was one of the early examples of a true console-like experience with almost no compromises. At its core, it's a spiritual successor to the original Pitfall, one of the best Atari 2600 games ever made, if not the best. In terms of gameplay, it's a classic and fairly challenging platformer, with jumping, climbing, running, and a variety of weapons, including the iconic whip. It's difficult not just because of enemies that can catch you off guard, but also because of the massive levels that are hard to navigate, and backgrounds that often blend in with the foreground. And all of that is just on the normal difficulty. But hey, at least there are cheats. Even back then, the PC version could be a bit problematic if your hardware wasn't just right, sometimes running too fast, and other times suffering from noticeable screen tearing. And unfortunately, you can see both of those issues here. So no, this isn't really the version I'd recommend playing today, but it definitely has historical value. Pretty much everyone knows 3D pinball for Windows, but if you ever wondered why they only gave us one great table and nothing beyond that, it's because that table is actually part of a bigger game called Full Tilt Pinball. Between the original release and its follow-up, you're looking at 6 different tables, but for some reason, far fewer people have actually heard about it. The game was developed by Maxis, and you can really see that level of polish here. The first game sticks pretty close to the Space Cadet style, with simple MIDI music and tables that still only take up a relatively small portion of the screen, even when you switch to full screen. The second game, though, is the real deal. It features CD quality audio and tables that take up much more of the screen, making everything feel bigger and more immersive. Like most pinball games, there are various missions to complete by hitting specific parts of the table. The controls are surprisingly advanced, too, including the ability to nudge or bump the table with your mouse. Just don't overdo it, unless you want to completely lose control of the flippers. Overall, it's a solid game that's definitely worth revisiting, especially considering we don't exactly have a huge variety of pinball games these days. Let's be honest, no strategy game really stood a chance against Command & Conquer Red Alert. Everyone and their mother was playing it. You just couldn't ignore the insane production values, the great soundtrack, and the gameplay that felt like a natural evolution of Command & Conquer, and of course, Dune 2.
Yes, sir. Waiting orders.
And yet, there was this one small game called Warwind that at least tried. Now, as you can probably tell, RTS games are not really my cup of tea, so most of what I'm saying here is based on the game's core mechanics and what other players have said about it. As you can see, the graphics are decent for the time, but overall it's not as visually appealing, and the movement can feel a bit sluggish at times, which isn't always ideal for a fast-paced RTS. However, the game does introduce some interesting mechanics that add a much-needed sense of freshness, and that's even before mentioning the 4 different campaigns. First of all, the upgrade system is much more sophisticated, combining special training with cybernetic upgrades that affect specific units. Another twist is stealth. In most RTS games, you mainly have fog of war that hides unexplored areas, but here, some units can actually conceal themselves completely and even disappear from the minimap. Add to that the ability to use mages who can learn new spells, and you get a pretty unique experience. That said, you should take into account the high difficulty and the fact that you might need to read the manual to fully understand what's going on. Also, while each alien race only has 7 missions, they can be quite long depending on how you play. Overall, this is an easy recommendation for anyone who misses the era when RTS games were king, and doesn't feel like there are enough modern options. You can pick it up on Steam or GOG. Hellbender is the sequel to Fury 3, which was one of the heavy hitters of Windows 95. Hellbender builds on it with much larger and faster levels. So large, in fact, that each mission can feel like an endless collection of structures and tunnels. Throughout this entire recording, I'm in the same mission, and honestly, I have no idea how many objectives I have left, or why the guide isn't pointing me to any yellow markers. Either way, it doesn't really seem like the game cares what I shoot at or what I crash into, at least not on easy difficulty, since I don't have all day. As usual with games like this, there are also transition sequences, but don't expect much beyond the simple 3D models of that era, along with various formulas and static diagrams that were probably there just to save a bit more space on the disc. Still, this is a game that might be worth your time if you miss terminal velocity or descent, offering a light upgrade and an option to play on a difficulty level that won't crush you within 2 seconds. Gubble is a charming Pac-Man style game that doesn't try to be much more than that, and honestly, that's exactly what makes it such a harmless little experience. Instead of eating dots, you hop onto different tools to remove screws and bolts from the floor. And if an enemy hits you, you fall off your tool. But you can always use your hover beam to float over enemies. Sounds too easy? Not really. Gubble isn't the kind of game that punishes you like most classic arcade titles, but it does get more complex in later stages. You start dealing with multiple areas, different tools, and overlapping paths that use the isometric perspective to confuse you. Also, there's one more little catch. Your saves show up as icons, which means they're limited, so you can't just save whenever you feel like it. The music could have been a bit better, but the sound effects are definitely, unique. Any resemblance to Crazy Frog is purely coincidental, I guess.
What's going on?
I hope you had fun, because I'm exhausted. Maybe I should have gone with a slightly less niche category next time.